My granddaughter Lexi.
Well,
Well, there you go.
Congratulate your boy.
Sit down here.
Time for us to begin tonight. If our teenage class teacher would go stop bothering our class in here. And, I'm just kidding, Mr. Walter. All right. Well, good evening, everybody. It's good to be here tonight for our Wednesday night Bible class. We're at the last study for 1 Corinthians. I know we've been in this book for a while. It's been a few months, and I'm glad that we've progressed the way that we've been able to, and I'm also glad that we're here tonight to do chapter 16. Just a couple of kind of housekeeping type things. Mentioned last week we need to pick a new course of study for the next Wednesday night adult class. I submitted some options. I didn't get a lot of feedback from anybody. I don't know if any of the elders did either. But the elders suggested, and if nobody objects, we'd like to go with the book by Phil Sanders, A Faith Built Upon the Sand. And this book is going to be a great study. He deals with a lot of issues as they pertain to the church today. It deals with a lot of contemporary issues that we face in our lives and in the lives of our families and children and grandchildren. And so we're going to go ahead and go with that study and order the material tomorrow, unless anybody else objects or would like to go with something else. So say it now or forever hold your peace, as they say. All right, does that sound good? What's that?
That's a wedding.
Oh man, I'm getting you mixed up, Mr. Frank. You gotta teach me a few things here. All right. Well, anyway, so we'll go ahead and go with that book, and we'll get those ordered. And we won't have class next Wednesday because next Wednesday is singing. But the following Wednesday we will have class, and so that'll be the first class for that week. You should have the books at least a week ahead of time to get into that. I hope everybody was able to pick up a handout for chapter 16. They're on the foyer table out there. And so this is going to be page 46 and 47, the close. And as we think about this, what we want to do is kind of, since this is our last class, just sort of recap and review some of the things that we've been going over time and time again to help get these firmly in our mind. Who is the author of 1 Corinthians?
Paul.
Paul, the Apostle Paul. What was the approximate date of the writing of this letter? Yeah, 55 AD. Very good. From what city did Paul write, probably? Ephesus. Ephesus, okay. Who is the audience of this letter, the primary audience here? The church at Corinth. All right, so tell me a little bit about this church at Corinth. What was going on there? Tell me some features of the city, type of people that were there, problems in the church, etc., whatever. Large? That's right, kind of a central hub for trade. What else?
Had a lot of problems.
A lot of problems.
A lot of judgment suits. Sexual morality.
Idol worship, absolutely. All right, very good. A lot of issues there. What was the purpose of the letter?
Correct the problem.
That's right, to deal with the problems, right? To deal with the problems. So if we had to pick two key chapters, which two would they be? 13 and 15, probably. Chapter 13 is the great treatise on what? Love, biblical love. The challenge that's in that chapter. And then we just got through discussing chapter 15, which is the treatise on the resurrection of Christ. And, as an offshoot of that, the resurrection promised for all believers. All right, very good. This is kind of a summary of the book, looking chapter by chapter if we were to look at it in a graphical format. Chapters 1 through 4 kind of followed the same theme. That's why they're in the same color. The division that existed in the church. Chapter 5 dealt with the problem of church discipline. Members that were engaged in sin, but yet the church was unwilling and were not dealing with that sin and disciplining that brother the way that they should have. Chapter 6, taking each other to law of the pagans and also the sin of fornication. Chapter 7, sexual relations, divorce, marriage, remarriage issues. Chapter 8 through 10 primarily dealt with the issue of eating meat offered to idols and the various intricacies of that. Chapter 11, rules for public worship, talked about head coverings, the Lord's Supper. And then chapters 12 through 14 dealt with the spiritual gifts and their misuse of the spiritual gifts. And in that section we had chapter 13, which showed that the principle of love ought to have embodied everything that they did, including the practice of these spiritual gifts. Chapter 15, of course, the resurrection. And now here we're going to look at chapter 16, the close. To introduce this chapter, I did a search in the original language, and you see some frequently occurring words. And in this last chapter, you see the term brother or brethren showing up 5 times. Indicates to us Paul usually, as a custom when he ends his letters, has a brotherly appeal. Perhaps he has some specific admonitions for traveling plans or the instructions whether or not to receive a certain brother or teacher that might be passing through. And so you see that term brother 5 times, Lord 5 times as well. The verb to greet 4 times, and that's very interesting. Talks about the fact that Christians are to greet each other, honor each other, have that warm family affection. Holy is shown 3 times, the exhortation to holy living, and the term church is shown 3 times in this chapter. Some unique words in this chapter. There are a few words in this chapter that show up nowhere else in the New Testament, only here in this chapter. The first one is found in chapter 16, verse 13, to act like a man or be brave. The King James says, quit ye like men. Come, in the exclamation sense, in 16:22. The only 2 times the term contribution shows up in the entire New Testament are right here in this chapter, in the first 2 verses. And so that's interesting to point out. And when we look at these types of things, it helps us to kind of gear our minds and figure out what Paul's probably going to be dealing with. These words that show up a lot show kind of a recurring theme, and also some unique words that don't show up anywhere else give us an idea of what Paul's going to be dealing with. So the contribution, Maranathema, we're going to look at that when we get there. And also to prosper was another one, 3 times in the New Testament, 1 showing up here. Key verses of this chapter, if we had to choose some, probably here verses 1 and 2 in regards to the contribution, very important. So that's a kind of a key section. The admonition in 16:13 to watch, stand fast in the faith, and the various admonitions given there. When Paul says in any of his letters, and just kind of as a heads up, whenever you see Paul say, I urge, or I beseech, or I beg, whatever translation you're using, that usually gives us a good idea that Paul is drawing attention to something very important. He bases kind of his letters sometimes around those verbs. And so when he's saying, I beseech you, or I urge you, he's saying that this is very, very important. And so we see that here in verse 15 and 16, and we'll talk about that when we get there. And then 1 Corinthians 16:20, the admonition to greet one another with a holy kiss. And we'll talk more about that when we get to the end of the chapter. All right, we will go like we normally do for those who aren't normally with us. We kind of read these passages together. We start at one front or the back side of the auditorium, and we'll do each reading, and we'll just kind of go in order, kind of like the snake. And if you don't want to read, you don't have to. Just say pass, and we will go on to the next person. Miss Joanne, we started with you last time, didn't we? Okay. Miss Joanne saying, yeah, you start at the front this time. Alexander, if you read verses 1 through 4 for us. I'm sorry, chapter 16, 1 through 4.
Now concerning the collection for the saints, as I have given orders to the churches of Galatia, so you must do also. On the first day of the week, let each one of you lay something aside, storing up as he may prosper, that there be no collections when I come. And when I come, whomever you approve by your letters, I will send to bear your gift to Jerusalem. But if it is fitting that I go also, they will go with me.
All right, very good. All right, so now he's kind of changing subjects. When he says now concerning, he's now changing gears. We know it's a definite break from what he was talking about before. So he says now concerning this collection, the collection for the saints. This is the first time in any of the writings that existed at this time that Paul mentions this collection. We see, of course, this collection being referenced in Acts 24:17, Romans 15:26, and 2 Corinthians chapter 8 and chapter 9. But this is the first time, in terms of the first time he's mentioned in any of his letters, that this collection is mentioned. This collection was primarily for some needy saints in Jerusalem, some Jewish Christians who were undergoing a famine in the land, and they were very destitute. And so Paul was going about as kind of a side mission to his missionary journeys, planting churches. He was gathering funds from these churches to bring back to the brethren in Jerusalem to make up for the poverty that they were in. And so it was for poor Jewish Christians in Jerusalem. And it's interesting to think about that because if you remember, if we were to put ourselves in the shoes of a first century Christian, there was a harsh, very definite prejudice between Jew and Gentile. And part of what the early church was trying to do, what Paul preached, the message of the gospel, was to try to reconcile those two groups of people together in one body. The gospel is powerful enough to break down all of these external barriers that separate us, color of skin, ethnicity. And so it was sort of a symbol that Paul is now asking for from a Gentile congregation. There were certainly some Jewish Christians in Corinth. There was a synagogue there. But you're dealing with a lot of people who came out of a pagan background. He's taking a collection from Gentiles, pagans, to bring it back to Jewish Christians. That may not mean a whole lot to us in the 21st century, but back then that was a very, very strong, intense sign that these brethren loved each other. And that these Gentiles were willing to give, even in their own poverty, Paul says, as some of the brethren that gave, to these Jewish Christians all the way in Jerusalem. People they had never seen, people they may never were going to see this side of eternity. And so it was symbolic of the unity that Paul was trying to instill in the church. When the command is given here to lay by and store, so he's talking about this collection, and now he's giving them specific instructions. He says, these are the same instructions I gave to the churches of Galatia. It's the same thing I'm commanding you to do. And so when he says, so you must do also, that's an imperative command from an inspired apostle. So absolutely binding on New Testament Christians. And so you were to do this as well. And he tells them how they're to do it. On the first day of the week, this has reference to the Lord's Day. The first day of the week is Sunday, the day that we meet to worship. That was the tradition of the early church. That was the day that was set aside for worship. That was the time the congregation was together, and that was the expedient time for them to take a collection. And so he says, on the first day of the week, let each one of you lay something aside. I read a lot of commentaries about this. Some people were saying, well, this meant that the individuals laid something aside at home, sort of in their own homes. But it really, in the context, when he's talking about them coming together, it seems that there was a church treasury where they were taking the collection every week, whatever that person earned that week. And it wasn't necessarily like our paychecks today, which can be pretty predictable, not always. But, you know, sometimes if they were a tradesman, the money they made that week was the number of units they sold that week. And so whatever they made that week, they gave whatever they could to the church treasury. This was a practice that was carried over from the synagogue. A lot of practices in the New Testament church, the worship that we have, were really kind of carried over from the Jewish synagogue. And one of the practices in the Jewish synagogue was to have a money bag for the poor people. And so you would give money, and whenever there was some sort of a need for someone who was destitute, they would take the money out of that fund and distribute that to that individual. And so that seems to be the reference here, a church treasury. Now, he also tells how we're to give and how much one is to give. And this is actually going to tie in nicely into our discussion question. I only put one discussion question this week because I believe that this is an important enough topic in this chapter that we need to really talk about this and discuss this. Why don't we go ahead and get to the discussion question? That's number 6 on page 47. It's one question, 4 parts. And from these 2 verses, we learn about the nature of Christian giving. And we're going to look at some other passages here, so be ready to turn to those. Perhaps you've referenced them in your answers. But first of all, from this passage, what do we learn about who is to give? Everyone, okay? Now, does that mean Christian and non-Christian?
He was talking to Christians.
Yeah, it's Christians, right? It's kind of implied. So every New Testament Christian is to give, right? What about people who are really, really poor? Yeah, it's a commandment to everyone. Of course, in proportion to what you can give. Remember the story of the widow with the 2 mites? You know, they were watching, Jesus and his disciples were watching all these rich Jews come by and give all their thousands of millions of dollars, whatever it was equivalent to back in their day. And they were watching all this, and then this little widow comes up, poor woman, old, hardly has anything. And she kind of stumbles up to the collection tray. She throws in 2 mites, basically equivalent to about 2 pennies. to us today. Jesus said that woman just gave more than all those people combined, because that was the most that she could give. She had nothing to give, and so she gave everything that she had. And so every Christian's to give. Of course, people who don't have as much money aren't going to be expected to give as much as somebody who has a lot of money. But everyone is to give. Every Christian has this responsibility. What do we learn about when one is to give? First day of the week, right? Now, does that mean that it would be sinful if somebody came in between Sundays and had a financial need of the congregation and it needed to be met before next Sunday? Would it be wrong for the church maybe to go to meet that need in between the Sundays? What do you guys think? That would seem to be where we're kind of getting in the way of ourselves. That would seem to, to say, oh, well, you have to wait till Sunday for us to take a special, but as a regular commandment, Paul is saying on the first day of the week, we're to give, lay by and store. That doesn't mean we can't give for any other need, any other time in between the Sundays. But on the first day of the week, we're to give. And so that's what the text says. Now the question comes up, well, would it be wrong to give once a month? I know what I'm going to make. Lord willing, I have a steady paycheck. I know what my salary is. Do I have to write a check every week, or can I just write a big one that would include all of the weekly checks every month? What are your thoughts?
Good.
Some people only get paid once a month.
Well, that's true. That's true. Some people, like farmers, they're only going to get paid when the crop comes out and they're selling it, so it's kind of a seasonal work, certainly. Well, I think, it seems to be that, Paul is specifying a certain day here. I wouldn't go as far as to say it'd be wrong to do it once a month. If that's what you want to do, that's more expedient for you. But, he says on the first day of the week. And so for me, I understand I might just give one big check at the end of the month, and there's nothing wrong with that. But, you can understand where someone might have an issue saying, well, it should really be once a week, Mr. Bill.
If you got a certain, say you got paid once a month and you're going to give a certain amount in that one check, you could set that up where you put that in, divide it up, put it in once every Sunday. You wouldn't have to wait until you got that one check.
Sure.
As a retired guy, I get paid once a month, but I give every Sunday. So you could work that out and divide it up and pay every Sunday. It'd be the same thing.
Sure.
It wouldn't be the difference.
Same amount total going in.
So, while it might not be all right, I had rather, me personally, not saying that everybody has to do that, but I will do it every Sunday.
Well, also from from a expedient aspect, and of course there's a difference between a command and an expedient to a command.
Right.
Command is something we have to do. The expedient is how we want to do that. Of course, we want to do the work to the best of our ability, to the best that we can. So from an expedient point of view, from the church leadership's point of view, if they have a budget, you're trying to hit that budget every week, and if everybody just gave once a month and it was zero every week, elders might say, well, what's going on with the contribution? Maybe the planning that how they were going to disperse those funds, might throw that off. There's a certain sense of regularity with the weekly payment, and but that's just
If we did that, we don't pay you once a month.
yeah, that's right. I better zip it here. I'm only kidding.
Back when this was started, when it's the first of the week, they take communion the first of the week. Back then, they considered that giving once a week, they'd do it along at the same time. And that's where they got started. That's right.
It was convenient.
Yeah. And back then, there wasn't banks and all that stuff, and that they carried the money with them, and what they made during the week, they had in pocket.
Exactly.
Well, I think I was at on the first day.
Yeah. So I just wanted to throw it out there for your consideration. Now C is where we're going to really have some fun here. All right, what do we learn from this verse or these verses about how much one is to give? As he prospered, how he is prospered. Okay, what's that mean? We know that's what it says, but what exactly does that What's that equate to? How else can we say that, in other words?
Any gain you have, you get back.
Exactly. Any gain that you have? All right. What else?
That's not after you pay everything else, that's for what you earn, isn't that what it means? No, what's left?
So you're saying, Miss Betty's saying that, it should be a priority, you give to the Lord first?
Yes.
All right, sure. What else?
Well, giving is a sacrifice, should be. So, I've heard people talk about 10% in the Old Testament. That's just a gauge. It has nothing to do with the New Testament. But, we should give as we prosper. It could be more one Sunday, it could be a little less. It depends on how you prosper.
Refer to Matthew 6. Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and the food and the clothing will be added. God basically promises his followers necessities. And let's face it, let's look at it strictly from a human standpoint. Why do we follow God? Is it a something for nothing proposition? Do we get anything out of it? And, human nature just, you very seldom find an individual who does something for nothing. And I've got to admit, I like the idea of being saved from sin. Given the other option,
Sure.
We're gonna have a problem with that one day.
That's right, Ms. Jerry?
Some people with the economy today live from paycheck to paycheck. And if they get that paycheck once a month, to me, it seems like it would be better for them to give that week, that month, day that they get it, or the Sunday after they get it, and then to break that up and give it a little bit every week, because it's done. Do you know what I'm saying? And then if you get any more during the week, give that. I mean, in the month, give that. But if you set it up that that's what you have, so to me, it seems like it would be better just go ahead and give it right then, not to break it up.
Well, it's definitely a very individual thing. It's not, you can say, this person should give. But as he has prospered, we know for sure this is talking about a proportion. A proportion. As the Lord has blessed somebody, it's proportionate. We don't have a fixed percentage that we're commanded to give. We have, Mr. Bill mentioned the 10% in the Old Testament. What many people don't realize is that the Jewish religious system was tied, most people realize that the system was tied to their civic system. So built into their system was not only the 10%, the temple aspect, the religious aspect, but they also had many other taxes to where it came up. They were given about half of their income. But of course, that included basically what we would have as our income tax. So that's kind of a benchmark. That's a piece to help us. But let me just throw this out there. We're going to look at some other passages that will hopefully fill in this picture. You have two people. And let's just assume everything is equal between these two people. Just to say for this, to make it simple, hypothetically, it's just two single people. One makes $100,000 a year. Okay. His basic necessities of life, if he's living, responsibly, as frugally as he can, is going to be about $30,000 a year. Let's just throw that out there. Okay, so that's person A. Person B, everything else is the same except he doesn't make as much per year. He makes $50,000 a year, half as much as the other man, and his basic living expenses are about the same as the other guy, so $30,000. So one man has excess of $20,000 per year. The other man has an excess of $70,000 per year. Now, what guidance would you give each of these people? Or how would you deal with this and say, well, how much should each of these people give? And what things should go through their minds if the command is to give as you have been taught? What do you guys think?
Whether either one of them are given sacrificially.
There you go. Is there a sacrifice involved? Okay, good. That's a good way to start that out. What else? What other factors would we think about?
So free will gift, not given begrudgingly.
Sure.
You don't have to calculate it down to the last penny.
Mm-hmm.
You're giving till it hurts, so to speak.
Okay, that's good. the sacrifice, giving till it hurts. That's probably the rule of thumb I've heard the most. It seems to be helpful. You give until you feel it, until it hurts, till you know you. So on one side, so if the guy who made $100,000 a year and only had $30,000 worth of expenses, what if he only gave I don't know, 20 grand a year? Would you say that man's giving all he can? Would that be a good benchmark for him? What do you guys think?
I think he'll be cheating God.
It's generous.
$20,000, a lot of money.
It is. But if he's making $70,000 of his overhead, you know, I mean, he's only spending $30,000 a year. Why not give more?
And what about the guy who makes 50? He has 30,000 worth of living expenses, and he gives 20. Same as the other guy. Which one was closer to this idea of giving as each is prospered and the sacrifice? The latter, right? Okay, let's look at a few passages. I hope this will kind of help develop this picture. And you know, the Bible doctrine of giving isn't just a black and white, clear-cut thing. It has some nuances, and every case isn't the same. And so we look at some other passages to help us to understand what God expects from us in terms of giving. Let's look first of all at 2 Corinthians chapter 8. And in 2 Corinthians, really the whole chapter, verse 8 or chapter 8 and also chapter 9, Paul is basically rebuking them for not getting this collection together the way that they should, the way he commands them to here in the first letter to the Corinthians. And so let's look together at 2 Corinthians, and we're just going to look at a few passages here. We would do well to read the entirety of these two chapters, but let's focus in on chapter 8, verses 8 through 15. And whoever's next, go ahead and read that for us, Mom, if you would.
Did you say 8 to what?
2 Corinthians 8 through 15.
I speak not by commandment, but by occasion of the forwardness of others, and to prove the sincerity of your love. For ye know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sakes he became poor, that ye through his poverty might be rich. And herein I give my advice, for this is expedient for you, who have begun before, not only to do, but also to be forward a year ago. How many did you say?
To verse 15.
Now therefore perform the doing of it, that there is a readiness to will, so there may be a performance also out of that which ye have. For if there is first a willing mind, it is accepted according to that a man hath, and not according to that he hath not. For I mean not that other men be eased and ye burdened, but by an equality. And now at this time your abundance may be a supply for their want, that their abundance also may be a supply for your want, and that there may be equality. As it is written, he that had gathered much and had nothing over, and he that had gathered little had no lack.
All right, very good. So he first of all uses Jesus as a model for giving, right? Jesus left heaven to be one of us for our benefit, to save us from sin. There's no comparison to that gift and to that level and that degree of giving and sacrifice. But he's the model nonetheless. And so now he's talking about the importance of giving from a willing mind, and how maybe at this time, you know, these saints over here need money. You provide for them. There might be a time in the future where, you know what, you might be in need, and your brethren are going to pick up your slack, and they're going to help you out when that time might come. And so that's 2 Corinthians 8. Now let's look next at 2 Corinthians 9, 5 through 7. 5 through 7. Okay, Ed, go ahead and read that.
Therefore I thought it necessary to exhort the brethren, and they would go before unto you, and make up beforehand your bounty, whereof ye had noticed before, that the same might be ready, as a matter of bounty, and not as of covetousness. But this I say, he which soweth sparingly shall reap also sparingly, and he which soweth bountifully shall reap also bountifully. Every man according as he purposed in his heart. So let him give, not grudgingly, or of necessity, for God loveth a cheerful giver.
All right. So God loves a cheerful giver. Now, some people feels like the check is attached to their finger, when they're putting it in. They don't, it's a joke. People are reluctant and they feel it's kind of an obligation. It's a grudging obligation. Oh, I have to give. But God, that's not the type of giving God wants. He wants us to be happy about it, be cheerful. I'm supporting the work of the Lord. I'm doing what He wants me to do. I'm helping people who are destitute. I'm helping spread the word. That should be a cheerful thing. In regards to that word cheerful, used in 2 Corinthians 9:7, it's kind of a cheerfulness of generosity. It's contrasted with grumbling and murmuring and questioning, like we read about in Philippians 2:14. And so so it should be of a cheerful nature. We give, and he also, remember, he says here that the person who sows sparingly cheats God. He's also going to reap sparingly. He who sows bountifully, who's generous as much as he possibly can, he's going to do what? He's going to reap bountifully. And so that principle is certainly there. Let's look at the Proverbs very quickly. Proverbs 22 and verse 9. Whoever's next.
There's another word there to take
Oh,
note
sir.
of, purpose is in this part.
Mhm.
I can't remember the Greek of purpose there, but the idea is carried of, this is what I have set aside that I'm going to give freely and willingly and happily.
Right.
And anything above and beyond that will still be with zeal and excitement, if you will, however you
Exactly.
look at it.
It's not a haphazard thing, is it?
Exactly. It's like, okay, I can give this much every week, and I know I can give that. And anytime the occasion arises, I will cheerfully give more, as I can. But I know that I can give this much. I purpose that.
Exactly. When you're sitting down doing the family budget, what should be in there? We should be budgeting in and figuring out what we can afford. Because it also wouldn't be wise, for me to give all this money, but then, not be able to provide for my family, and then having to be going right back to the church and asking, there's a wisdom in that. But if we plan beforehand, this is what I'm going to give, then that alleviates that problem, a little bit of planning. Good. Very good. Proverbs 22:9.
He that takes a bound eye should be blessed, but he that of physical bread to the poor.
That's perfect. Very good. So the person who has a bountiful eye shall be blessed. The person who is generous, especially towards the poor, that person is going to be blessed. And the person gives his bread to the poor. We'll look next at Philippians 2:14. We'll look at just two more of these. You can write down the rest of these for your information if you want to look at those later. But let's look at Philippians 2:14, and then the next one we'll look at Luke 6:38. Philippians 2:14.
Do all things without murmurings and disputings.
There's that verse. The opposite of being cheerful about it is grumbling and murmuring about the work and giving. So that's kind of the opposite of that. Now lastly, let's look at Luke 6:38. Luke 6:38.
Give, and it shall be given unto you. Good measure pressed down and shaken together and running over shall men give into your bosom, for with the same measure that ye meet withal, it shall be measured to you.
Very good. Jesus here is talking about, in the context, he's talking about being merciful to others. A lot of times attached to the idea of being merciful to others is having compassion on them, and in particular having compassion on people who are destitute, giving financially to them to help out with their needs. In that context, Jesus says, give. It's going to be given back to you. We're lending to the Lord. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together. The image here is like a measuring container, kind of like maybe a mason jar of their day. You fill it up with the grain, but there's still a little bit of some air in there. And so what you do is you shake it up to make sure there's more room, and you pour even more in. The idea is you've done all you can to reduce every space of waste of air in there, and it's compacted down as hard as it can, and it's still overflowing into your lap. God's going to bless you in that way if you give for His cause, cheerfully, in the way that He desires for us to give. So with the same measure that you meet withal, it shall be measured to you again. And so that kind of goes back to what Mr. King was saying earlier. When we give to others, we don't do it kind of, that person's going to pay me back, but we do have the end in mind that God's going to ultimately bless us. In teaching this verse, one of my instructors at the school, he said, next time, this Sunday, I'm going to test you guys to do something. He says, when that collection plate comes around, you dump everything that's in your wallet. Change the way you think about things. But there's certainly tremendous blessings for giving. And so we learned about how we're to give. And so the last section here on this discussion question is, what practical guidelines should Christians use today to determine if they're giving enough? And we've kind of talked about some of these. We have the percentages of tithing in the Old Testament. Tithing's done away with. These are free will offerings. It's not a set percentage, but that's a benchmark. We had the idea come up that you give until you feel it, until there's a sacrifice being made, until it hurts. What else? What other guidelines should we use? Because we all want to be, we want to feel like we're giving enough, we're giving what we should. What other guidelines would you suggest?
Give us the need is there.
Absolutely.
I was thinking to say, even though we give we set a certain amount on Sunday, but during the week, all of us at some point in time give, whether it's money or time, and helping people that need help. People that come by the church, sometimes we just give out of our pocket. We do. So we give during the week as well as we do on the first couple of weeks. But we should be willing to give 7 days a week of our time. It doesn't always have to be money. Buying food, clothing, shoes. Could be many things that we could do. If you just look around, it's a lot you can do.
I'll just kind of throw this out here. I personally believe the more I study about giving and the idea of sacrifice and the detachment we're to have from physical things, I think in America, when we talk about how financially blessed we are, and we are, we probably all drove here in cars that have air conditioning, maybe even heated seats, leather seats, nice upholstery. We probably had a clean meal, food that we wanted. We could eat anywhere we wanted to. We have clothes that adequately cover us. We have jackets. We're very wealthy, especially compared to other areas of the world. This is a dollar bill. You know what would happen if I would have done that same thing in a third world country? They might have tried to kill each other over that dollar. Folks are hungry. They don't have clothes. Kids are walking around with no shoes in junkyards, needles sticking out. We are so rich in this country. Even our poor are more wealthy, relatively speaking, than much of the world. I'm not taking away from people who are struggling here, but compared to the rest of the world, we're very wealthy. Look at the statistics. We're in the very top 5%, even if we're at the poverty line. And so when we think about giving and how many luxuries we have in our lives, we can't help but feel challenged. And when we see people who are struggling through the things that they're struggling in other pieces of the parts of the world, it not only humbles us, it goes so far as I feel ashamed. I feel ashamed of what I have and the luxuries that I have when there are people out there with that degree of suffering. And so the need is definitely there. There's always opportunities, like Mr. Bill said, if we just open our eyes and look around. Even brethren in other parts of the world going through various natural disasters, poor, and they need help. And so very important that we think about this biblical teaching about giving. The Bible has a great deal to say about giving, but we're going to go ahead and move on. We're running out of time. Let's take, we're going to skip over, none of this is unimportant, but I do want to get to verses 13 and 14 very quickly. Whoever's next, if you would read 1 Corinthians 16, 13, and 14.
Watch, stand fast in the faith, be brave, be strong. Let all that you do be done with love.
All right, very good. So here he's giving some kind of final admonitions. Watch. That verb means to keep awake. Be alert, watchful, attentive. vigilant, circumspect. Don't be lifting your heels up like you've done something. Be ready. Be on guard against false teaching, against the wiles of the devil. One definition is to be in a continuous readiness and alertness to learn. Constantly be on guard, especially in a church that was so riddled with so many problems, many of them doctrinal, resurrection, many of them interpersonal within the church. And so watch. Stand fast in the faith. Stand firm. Be constant. Persevere. All these ideas kind of come together. I really like this next section. Be brave, or quit ye like men. We say that even today. I think it kind of translates. We have the idiom, man up. Be a man. Stand up for what's right. Have a backbone. So this idea is be courageous. It can mean to exhibit courage in the face of danger. That's the idea here, the admonition to Christians. Be brave, stand fast, and also be strong. To become strong psychologically. Not physically here, but psychologically. But don't forget, let everything that you do be done with love. 1 Corinthians 13, that's what the whole chapter was about. Paul in the very beginning of that chapter said, you could give your body to be burned, you could give every dime you have to the poor. It's not done out of love, it's worthless. And then, of course, in 14:1, in talking about the exercise of the spiritual gifts, those are to be exercised in love. Let's go ahead and take these last couple, and then we're going to finish a little early. Let's go ahead and take these. Whoever's next, read 15 and 16 for us.
I beseech you, brother, the house of Stephanus and that is the first fruits of Achaia, and that they have addicted themselves to the ministry of the Son, that you submit yourselves unto such, and to everyone that hath with us and affliction.
Very good. I love the way the King James renders that when it says that they addicted themselves. A lot of times we think of an addiction as a negative thing, right? Usually substance abuse has to put a negative connotation, but in the King James it says these people have addicted themselves to the service of God. Probably better translated devoted. They've devoted themselves. That term devoted means to do something with devotion, with the possible implication of a systematic, regular activity. These people purposed to do the work of the Lord. It wasn't a haphazard thing. It wasn't if I feel like it kind of thing. Well, maybe we'll go to worship this Sunday. They had set it up. This is how we're going to live our lives. They determined beforehand, this is what we're going to do. We're going to give our lives to the service of God. We don't know exactly what these individuals did. Perhaps they cared for the poor. Perhaps they were involved in teaching ministry. But nonetheless, Paul says that they devoted themselves to the ministry of the saints, therefore submit to them. One commentator on this verse said this. He said, personal work for Christ, personal work, individuals, families, personal work for Christ is still the only way to win the world for Christ. Voluntary personal work, he said, if all Christians did. We could change the world if we all got busy like the family of Stephanus. And so he certainly serves as a great example for us. I commend you to the rest of the chapter. I trust that you've read it and gone through that. I do want to do something with the last few minutes we have here. It's a little different. I've enjoyed very much teaching this class. I love teaching the Bible, especially this book of 1 Corinthians. I enjoy it very much. It's been a great study. I want to make sure I'm doing the best job I can as a teacher. I want to make sure that this adult Wednesday night class is the best it can possibly be, and that our Bible education department is the best it can possibly be. So what I've done is I've developed a class evaluation form. They do this at the university level. At the end of the semester, they hand them out to all the students, and they basically fill out the survey and tell the instructor how he did, how the class, whether it was successful or not, any comments they would suggest for improvement or things they would change. I don't want you to put your names on these, but I would ask that anybody who's been here for most of the classes that's been involved, please fill this out. I'm not going to go back and do some forensic analysis to figure out who wrote what. And frankly, I think we all have a good enough relationship where I would accept your criticism even if it was not written down. It's not what it's about. I just want to make sure that I'm doing the best job I can. And so if you would please just take a couple minutes at this end of class to just fill this out. You can leave them in the pew. After everybody leaves, well, don't do that, so I'll know where you sit. That's not a good idea. Set them on the foyer. That's not a good idea. How about on the back pew where Gloria normally sits? Just set them face down over there. You don't have to write your name on them, just please fill them out. If anybody needs a pen, I have a couple extras. Should we go ahead and pass these out? I appreciate you guys so much. Thank you for bearing with me through this class. You guys have been a great class. Appreciate your comments and discussion very much. If anybody still needs one, just let me know and I'll distribute it. Anybody need a pen?
Anybody else?
Anybody else need one? Guys, I have very thick skin, so you don't be scared of hurting my pins. I just want it to be honest. I mean that. Just
instead of filling out this form. If you will, mark in your hymn book number 271. We are following the verse for just a few moments. 271. And then turn over a few pages, 274. I have found a friend in Jesus, he's everything to me. He's the fairest of 10,000 to my soul. The lily of the valley, in him alone I see. All I need to cleanse and make me fully whole. In sorrow he's my comfort, in trouble he's my stay. He tells me every care on him to roll. He's the lily of the valley, the bright and morning star. He's the fairest of 10,000 to my soul. Oh, he all my griefs has taken, and all my sorrows borne. In temptation he's my strong and mighty tower. I have all for him forsaken, and all my idols torn from my heart, and now he keeps me by his power. Though all the world forsake me, and Satan tempt me sore, through Jesus I shall safely reach the goal. He's the lily of the valley, the bright and morning star. He's the fairest of 10,000 to my soul. He will never, never leave me, nor yet forsake me here, while I live by faith and do his blessed will. Oh, the fire about me, I've nothing now to fear. With his hand my hungry soul shall fill. Then sweeping up to glory, to see his blessed face, where rivers of delight shall ever roll. He's the lily of the valley, the bright and morning star. He's the fairest of 10,000 to my soul.
Please open up the New Testament to Matthew 6:24. Matthew 6, verse 24. I know most people here know about Mr. Michael Jordan. He's not playing in the NBA anymore, but arguably best player who's ever lived, ever played in the NBA. Some of you might argue with that. But in his book, Driven from Within, he tells a story about a visit that he paid to one of his friends' house. And of course, when you're Michael Jordan, you have friends in high places. This man was an owner and CEO of an NBA team, Fred Whitfield. And they were getting ready to go out for dinner, and it was a chilly night apparently. And Michael Jordan didn't have a coat. And so he asked his host, Mr. Whitfield, if he had a jacket that he could borrow. Now, Michael Jordan goes into the coat closet as instructed and tries to look for a coat, and he does something a little odd. He begins to take all of these pieces of clothing out. He takes shorts, shirts, jackets, shoes, socks, and he starts throwing them in the hallway. And Mr. Whitfield's kind of wondering what's going on, and Michael Jordan proceeds to go to the kitchen and get a knife or scissors or something and starts to chop up all of these clothes. Bizarre. And then after he's done with that, he takes the clothing out to the trash, throws them away. And of course, Mr. Whitfield's kind of like, all right, what'd you do with my clothes there? Well, Michael Jordan was sponsored by Nike, wasn't he? He went into that man's closet and he found every piece of Puma equipment and did away with it. And when he returned, he said, you can call my Nike representative in the morning. He'll replace everything that I just threw away. But you make sure that it's Nike. And don't ever let me see you again in anything other than Nike. And he went on to say, you cannot ride the fence. Now in Matthew chapter 6 and verse 24, Jesus essentially taught the same principle. You cannot ride the fence when it comes to serving God and serving the world, mammon. Spiritually speaking, we can't afford to ride the fence. Notice what he says here. He says, no man can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. Even if it were possible for us to serve two masters, which it's not, God would not let us. God is a jealous God, not in the sense that we are jealous, not an unrighteous jealousy, but He's protective over His people. He recognizes He's the only God, and He does not accept us worshiping anything else besides Him. And long ago, at Mount Sinai, at the giving of the Ten Commandments, God gave the commandment to the people through Moses, thou shalt not have any other gods before me. And He also said, thou shalt not bow down, or you shall not make unto thee any graven image, or any likeness of anything in the heaven above, or in the earth beneath, or in the waters under the earth. God takes it very seriously whom we worship, and so He wants us to be completely devoted in our lifestyle and our worship to Him. We are either with God or we are against Him. There is no middle ground when it comes to that choice. So the question tonight is, have you made your choice? Or are there rivals in your closet that need to be taken out, chopped up, and taken to the curb? I don't know what it is in your life, but I hope that if there's anybody here tonight that has something between them and God, and you don't have 100% confidence that you've been saved from your sins, that you're walking in harmony with Him, that if the Lord were to come in the next moment, that we would be saved. If you don't have that confidence, either because you've never become a Christian in the first place, or you become a Christian and you've walked off that path, we exhort you and encourage you very seriously to consider your soul tonight. And if you have a spiritual need, we want you to respond to the Lord's invitation while we sing this invitation song.
I heard the voice of Jesus say, come unto me and rest. Lay down thy weary one, lay down thy head upon my breast. I came to Jesus as I was, weary, worn, and sad. I found in Him a resting place, and now has made me glad. I heard the voice of Jesus say, behold, I freely give the living water, thirsty one, stoop down and drink and live. I came to Jesus and I drank of the life-giving spring. My thirst was quenched, my soul revived, and now I live in Him. I heard the voice of Jesus say, I am this dark world's light. Look unto me, thy morn shall rise, and all my day be bright. I look to Jesus and I found Him my song. And in that light of life I walk till triumphant days are done.
You see, I'm going to ask Jennifer Prescott if she would make her way to the front here. For those of you who do not know Jennifer, Jennifer Prescott has been coming to worship services here with her son Sean for, I don't know exactly how long, a couple months maybe, with Walter and Barbara. And last week on Thursday night, Jennifer decided to put the Lord on in baptism and obey the gospel and became a New Testament Christian, and a Christian only. And we're so proud of her for that, and we just want to recognize her at this time, and the congregation wanted to give you, Jennifer, a brand new New King James Bible with your name on it. And so that's for you to commemorate your placing membership here and obeying the gospel. And also we want to let you know that I know from me, and I speak on behalf of everybody, we want to do everything we can to make you feel part of this church family here. And we're so grateful that you're going to be able to contribute to the efforts here. We know you have a lot of great talents and abilities and knowledge of the Bible. It's going to help the work of the church here. And so we're so grateful for your decision. Thank you. And of course, stay afterward. If you don't know Jennifer, get to know her, take her hand, hug her neck, let her know how much she means to us. And we're so grateful that she and her son are here. We also have just a few quick announcements, and we will dismiss for the night. We have a new high school and college age class beginning on June 30th when we get back from camp on hot topics. There's some flyers out there. Here's the last one if anybody would still like one. We're going to be beginning that, and I'll be the teacher, and that will be Sunday mornings here at Northside. Also, our youth devotional is going to be tomorrow night right here at the building at 7 o'clock p.m. And so we hope everyone will be here for some spiritual nourishment, but also some food and some games and some fun. And so we're looking forward to that tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. As I mentioned during the Bible class hour, next week on Wednesday night is our singing night, and so be prepared for that. And also, the area-wide singing is going to be hosted here at Northside a week from this Friday. So Friday week, we'll be hosting the singing. If you would like to bring a dish, some food, there's a sign-up list on the bulletin board, and we encourage you to do that. We're leaving for camp Sunday afternoon. We're very excited about that. I know the young people are starting to get excited for that, and you guys pray for me. I know it's. I told Mr. Frank or somebody, if I don't come back on Friday, then y'all send for me because I may have been eaten alive out there. But we're really excited about that. Glad my niece is going to be coming with us. She's visiting from Florida, and so pray for us seriously in our travels as we go up there. And if anybody would like to come visit anytime during the week. There's a skit night Thursday night. Also, they have Wednesday night kind of services, and so if anybody wants to come out and support our young people, you're welcome to do that and get with me for directions. We have many people on our sympathy and sick list, prayer list, and we need to remember, of course, Paula Lyons, Frank and Jean in their travels. Frank, what's the latest on the update on Paula?
We don't know a bit more than we did 2 weeks ago.
All right.
Hopefully Monday we will get some more information.
Okay, good, very good. Glad you guys have been able to travel safely, and that's good news. Also, Lori's great nephew, is that right? Theodore Craig, a little baby boy. He's home from the hospital now, which is great news, but he's still awaiting to have his surgery. And so we know it's a very serious thing. We need to remember little baby Theodore in our prayers, also for the family, and also Brother David Riley from the Forest Park congregation outside of Atlanta. We need to continue to remember him in our prayers. Also, this is the last night. We're gonna set in stone our Wednesday night devotional rotation for you young men, older men, any men in the congregation who want to participate and give devotionals on Wednesday nights. I've got a few names in, but if you would like to get your name on that list, it needs to be by tonight because I'm making this list tomorrow morning, and then we're going to be on a rotation of the men here doing the Wednesday night invitations. And so just let me know if you'd like to participate in that. Any other announcements before we close up? All right. Why don't you stand one more time and be led in our closing prayer.
Father, we thank Thee for this day. We're grateful for life and the health You've given, the opportunity that we've had to simply to study from Your Word. We pray, Father, for those that were mentioned that are sick, and all of those that are on our sick list. We pray, Father, that You would be with them. We pray that we have will, and we still do that. Father, we thank Thee for Jennifer. We thank Thee for her coming forward and remembering our bodies. Pray that You would be with her and be with us as we work with her to help her in any way that we can. We pray for our account that's coming up this week. We pray that You would be with the teachers and students there, and much good comes up. be with us as we separate now and go to our home. Forgive us for our minutes and Christ we pray. Good to see y'all. You live here?
Oh, we have